All right, it's showtime. It's showtime with Why Wells Fail with our favorite star, Lloyd C. Brown with Refined Completions. Lloyd, how are you?
I'm all good today. Just trying to stay cool in a
Awesome.
hot.
It is hot. I'm on the road. I'm in Abilene. I'm coming to you via Starlink, thanks to you. And the show must go on. It doesn't matter, right? That's the kind of world we're in.
That's right.
And speaking of the kind of world we're in, there's a lot of things that in the oil field that are misunderstood, but things are changing. And today's topic is the patent difference that changes everything. And so we're going to learn about what is the process patent isn't about what's in the jug, but what happens after it hits the rock. Why is this important, Lloyd?
Well, ultimately, so so many patents in the world. You look at a widget, or the expanding hose that they talk about right now. You see these ads, and they say we have all these patents. Those are almost always a specific patent around the product. And so it's about one thing and the things that make it unique, but a process is the thought behind something. It is the mechanisms and um, the more about the science. You know, Lipitor for a long time was the only um, disposition product on the market because Pfizer owned the patent for how you stop the process of stopping deposition. And so any chemistry or blends of chemistries that interrupted the deposition of cholesterol was they owned. Well, the same thing for us. Any process or any chemistry intervention that interrupts the process of degradation that we've identified in our process patent, we own. It's not about one specific chemical. It's about a functioning of multiple chemistries and how they interact on the geology. And that's what's really important because in this marketplace, we have so many companies, and we used to be one of them, that focused on a product rather than a process. And if you don't know all of the details of interrupting degradation and the disruption of equilibrium, then you're really only focused on one part of a solution. It's not holistic. So a process patent is much more holistic, and it gives us the method and the way to know whether or not we're being successful in creating this dynamic equilibrium you and I've talked about. So it's there's just a big um, a more detail. It's just more in depth, and it's extraordinarily hard to get a process patent versus a utility patent that is tied to a product or a thing.
So, all the conversations that you and I have had, I see your process patent um, is rolling over or bleeding into the business processes of your clients, right? Where a product seems more like just the application out in the field, where you guys are impacting is holistic in the company as well, not just out in the field.
No, that's exactly right, because you have to have things that you do before you um, provide an intervention that brings dynamic equilibrium. So there's pre-work that is done both on the geology, but to your point, on what not to do. There's a lot of mechanical things that we don't want to do, that we know are that exacerbate the degradation of the geology and hyper increase disruption. And then there's also the part that's afterwards, because if you're not measuring, if you're only using the arbitrary, how much hydrocarbon did you make, but you don't know why you're making that, you don't have an understanding, you get into a sense of false security, and you're not looking at all the parameters that are impacting the longevity of the well. You're just looking at a very short time frame. And so it, you know, you look at all the guys that used all the anabolic steroids years ago and what happened to their bodies and their health, versus now you've got hormone replacement therapy, which is using a targeted amount for a specific purpose that is a holistic, and you're measured before and you're measured after when you're talking about age management. Well, we're doing the exact same thing when it comes to age management for a well, but we're doing it making sure that we do all the things to produce a less encumbered or a more healthy well that's going to have less problems as it ages over time. And so that's what the real difference is.
You're saying the anabolic steroids, generally those bodybuilders or weightlifters, they would self-diagnose, they would self-subscribe, they would figure out whatever the formula, and then be what it may, as long as we're seeing some results. And whereas if you do it in accordance with a physician that's doing diagnostics with labs and being able to measure before, it seems like you would have a better outcome. You could prevent a lot of side effects.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. And the more we push back age management, the younger that it gets, when that intervention is happening, when that recognition of things we don't do. Diet's one of the big things. Today, we understand the impact of consuming a lot of sugar. There's just so many health-related correlations that are very similar in what we're doing in this well or series of wells. But just like you and I are unique, the geology can be very similar, but also unique, and the inputs are unique. So creating a real standardized process, and that's what it takes to get a process patent. The timing of and the level of scrutiny that a product patent goes through for a thing called prior art is, you look at it, man, we've been using hoses forever, right? And I'm sure there's an original patent for a rubber hose. Well, today, these expanding, contracting, it's not the function of the hose itself that's different. It's what happens when it turns on and when it turns off. Well, the same thing is for us. We want to know what happens when it turns on, and our goal is to keep it from turning off, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but the requirements to get to a place that you're provided with the protections, our company's provided with the protections of the patent, the level of scrutiny to get there is even higher. And like in the concept of the hose, there's prior art, there's been hoses. So they have to list in their patent all the prior art, and where this is more unique. What's really cool about ours is it's completely novel, which means no one in the world at the time that we filed this, was there any existing prior art. So when you hear something being completely novel, that's why it's such a transitory technology, because it's never been thought of before. Or if somebody's had some concepts of it, they've never captured it in the way that we have. And then discovered the model of what happens in the degradation. And there was part of our patent, there's a natural law that we discovered. And guess what? You can't patent a natural law. It's a law. But understanding that natural law is part of the process patent. So there's a multiple of different discoveries that brought about the patent that we have.
So you have a product patent as well, and
we do have a product, an older product patent
Yep.
on the original shell guard that was first in 2011 and has been updated over the years. But yeah, we had a product, quote unquote, patent, and this one is an all-encompassing process patent.
So when you compare and contrast those, help me understand. Took a product patent, what, a year to get?
It was about a specific chemistry.
Yeah.
So if somebody else finds a chemistry that responds like that, but it's not that specific molecule or the molecules that were identified, they can go out there and attempt to accomplish the same thing.
And then a process patent, the time period on that.
Well, the patents are 18 years from the last unique filing that you have that's tied to that. And so one of the things about it is you're continuing to learn. So we will continue to add to it as we learn.
And then it's international in nature as well.
That's correct.
So
we first filed in the European Union and did that because it gives us a much broader reach than just doing it through the USPTO. But we are filed in the United States as well now.
What a timely thing, because just yesterday that trade agreement was signed with European Union, and they're going to be purchasing over $150 billion worth of energy from the U.S.
Yeah, well, I don't mean to correct you, but it wasn't signed. There's an overall agreement. I think they still got to hammer out a bunch of the details. But yeah, the fact of the matter is we're going to have to ramp up our energy production. It's going to be really good for our natural gas industry on ramping up. And so those are exciting things, very exciting things.
Out of the typical energy companies that you deal with now, every one of these data centers that they're ramping up can become their own power producing. They can co-locate their own power producing aspect. You potentially could have a whole lot of different customers rather than just the typical energy companies that you deal with.
Well, I mean, yes. The data centers are consumers, right? And so part of the solution is how do we do on-site generation? And so like the big Fermisi project, the 19 million square foot project here, I believe they're looking at either 16 or 18 gigawatts of total power production to help support that. But it's also to create additional revenue from providing power solutions because we're in a real electrical deficit in this country as we look at the demands going forward. So great opportunities, both domestic and foreign, for our industries. We need to see how all this shakes out over the near term. Predominantly going to be a lot of natural gas. And the great thing is our country is awash in natural gas, untapped reserves that we know we have. But now we're going to be able to utilize it. And like in the Permian Basin, so much of the natural gas we have is not being produced and or being sequestered because there's no way to transport it in pipelines. And, that's one of the things that this administration is starting to do is remove the regulatory hurdles and blocks to help us, the industry, start getting that transportation of the products out there. And you look at the Northeast and New York. New York imports natural gas when Pennsylvania and even Western New York has huge amounts of natural gas that they haven't tapped because they've got, I don't know, they like to burn fuel oil instead and or imported natural gas, that it just raises their cost instead of utilizing one of the most clean resources of energy they have, and it's local. You just, stupid is as stupid does, I guess.
Well, the demand for more and more of this energy is not just going to be national, but it's going to be international. And even more so, it's incumbent upon these companies to produce optimal wells.
That's correct.
And so taking your process into consideration could really help augment their initial or planned production should they know about your process.
Yeah, that is correct. And efficiency is where it's at, right? We're looking, they're looking at creating more energy efficient chips, right? One of the big articles I read this weekend. Well, we need to maximize the resource that we get from every well. And our process that's the thinking and that's the orientation, is we want to do more with less. And the only way to do that is to get more effective and efficient. And by understanding the process of disruption and the process of being able to bring a disrupted environment into a dynamic state, that we're producing as much hydrocarbon with the least amount of detrimental effect to the geology, that's the goal. And so there's so many parallels in efficiency, and that's the unique thing and the difference between a product and a process. A process is focused on improvement. That's why they call it process improvement.
So what I'm thinking right now is, like, in a percentage perspective, the case studies that you guys have, successful case studies, what are we looking at as far as an increase in production? Is it, more or less in a percent?
Well, I hate to even tell you, because everybody will throw rocks at me and call me a liar.
Yeah.
But in the best documented case that was an intentional 10-well trial, the uplift is almost 50%.
Wow.
On average.
Wow.
Now, there was really bad process on the other side that caused that impact. But it's, that's how much opportunity is there. Some of it is also geology dependent. The more volatile the geology, the greater the opportunity for uplift, of course. The less volatile or less dynamic the geology, generally speaking, the impact is going to be lower. And when we're in these cases, we're talking, 10 to 15%. But you take 10 or 15% over the life of a well, for every 8, you get an extra one for free, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of the way you look at it. But when you're 40%, man, every 2.5, you get a third one for free. So it's accretive, and so there's tremendous opportunity there. And we haven't been utilizing the technology long enough to really see, what does it look like in 5, 6, or 10 years, right? But just what we're seeing from the indicators right now, the number of well failures due to mechanical failure related to corrosion, scale, and even paraffin are significantly less. So there's just it's the law of compounding in effect. there's just a lot of there.
You know, our show's live every week, and we have, you know, our audience is growing. And if you have questions that you're wanting to hear the answers to, maybe I'm not asking, you know, be sure to comment, because we'll be happy to cover those. And also be sure to, if you're getting value out of this, to like it, because that tells the algorithms all the good signals. That's a process improvement. And so this commodity mindset versus a process mindset, where's some other areas that we haven't discussed in this episode that impacts improvements?
Well, some of it is the waste material that's coming off. You know, back in the day, before we had a lot of water management, produced water management, we disposed of our flowback waters and our produced waters to these things called saltwater disposal wells, and that still happens today. But the secret back then was these disposal wells made more money off of the skim of oil that was being shipped to them than what they were making at disposing the water. There was such a huge amount of hydrocarbon that was trapped in that oil. Well, part of our process is emulsions, or the lack thereof, is one of the results and benefits, and that's how we know we're doing our job well. So, and an emulsion costs more money. You got to go in and treat that. And so when we come in and see the impact of those lack of emulsions, that's an ancillary benefit. And it's something that we can look at the past at what the real cost was versus today. And then there's a reduction in the amount of chemistries. And I see Craig Williams said the selection of the frac water source is key. And when Craig talks about the microbiocides that are used, he's absolutely correct. The right kind, because some of them are detrimental to the geology. And because of that, they don't kill the bugs as well as they should. So they're not near as effective or efficient. And one of the call outs from choosing the frac water source, you need to have, and this is a freebie for everybody out there, you need to have your water be iron free. Iron, the last thing we want to do is pump iron down hole, because iron oxide and any components that are iron based related, it's one of the stabilizing agents in emulsions. And so when we're looking at that, you know, that again, Craig's talking about what is the process that we're looking for, the key performance indicators of just the source water that we're going to frac with. And you got to know what it is. And you got to know the constituents of it, because you have to measure what it looked like going down hole, and now what does it look like coming back, and what are the changes. And so there's just there's just we could go on and on and on, and not even talking about, you know, the reduction of H2S scavengers and corrosion inhibitors and scale inhibitors, and, you know, the transportation costs that happen when you have large amounts of CO2 and H2S. And those are compounding. So, you know, if you're not mitigating and minimizing the amount of material that is being sold there, it's impacting not only can you sell your gas, but and the hydrocarbon that's there, the oil, but what is the penalty you're going to pay? And or they may say, we're not going to take it anymore. We can't blend it down to where you know, we can receive your product, and so you're going to have to find another outlet. And that happens all the time as well.
What's one of the recent things that kind of has surprised you? You know, you're monitoring what's going in, what's coming out. What's something that's come up that was kind of interesting or new? I'm putting you on the spot.
Yeah, you are, and that's okay. one of them is that's really interesting and new is we have said that the normal is producing a lot more water before you see hydrocarbon. Now we're having to really put a caveat in that because it's really dependent of the geology more so than we know than ever. So one of the things we're having to make sure is the type of geology that we're talking about. That doesn't hold true in some of the more conventional like geologies that we're now doing horizontal fracking on. We're seeing the water and the oil show up much faster in those. There's not that delay, and that was a big surprise. And then we went back and we're like, well, that makes sense. And when we're looking at the water that's coming back, but the keys are we don't have emulsions, and we're still seeing the rate of getting the load water, the frac water back before we start seeing reservoir water. But the time frames have
Collapsed.
Collapsed is a good word for that. From what we've seen on the traditional unconventional shale geology. So that's one thing.
Yeah, that's encouraging because that was kind of a stumbling block, is having to wait for a longer time to see the process work, right? And so to get more immediate feedback is encouraging for the overall addressing those objections.
To be quite frank with you, at first it was like, what's wrong?
Mm-hmm. That's scary.
We're not supposed to see this. And so that was another aha and a great lesson to learn again. And it's, sometimes you when you start making very broad generalist statements, the good Lord and Mother Nature show you that you need to not do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for that comment, Craig. If there's anybody else that has another question, please feel free to pop that in there. I'm wondering, these folks that you're working with now, they have to be aware that, hey, we gotta really step up. I mean, this is encouraging. How fast do they pivot when they realize that there's going to be so much more demand and expectation of production now? How fast do they pivot?
Well, there's not a real big pivot yet because there's still the unknown near term on the price of oil. And if you look at where the price is, not just what it is today, but you look out 3 months, 6 months, there's some real indicators that the price of oil is going to be less before it's more. And that kind of uncertainty with the capital efficiency that companies are working with today and the commitments that they have to return capital to their shareholders, it's not a rapid pivot. We're in a place of disruption in the predictability of the price of oil today. And natural gas, again, we can ramp that up a little bit quicker, but we'll have to take rigs that currently are drilling predominantly for oil and move those into the more gas-rich plays, which then leads us back. You get it. How do you get it to the LNG facility so it can be liquefied and shipped overseas? And we've got a bottleneck there. So there's some bottlenecks out there that probably indicate some near-term pain of being able to enjoy the commitments these countries are making to buy U.S. energy.
All the more reason to embrace the refined process.
I hadn't thought of it that way, Steve, but you're right. I mean, if we're going to do less, we need to make more with less, right?
Mm-hmm. And if the more uncertainty is, the more that a predictable process would mitigate, unknowns, I guess.
That's correct.
So, what's one question that I haven't asked, Lloyd, that we need to cover?
Hmm. I don't know that this was a question, but for all of us to relate, I'd like for us to think about times when we've done things um, that we didn't know were detrimental to our health or our relationships.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't know we had bad process, and then what happened when we saw it? We saw the difference. We became aware. That's what you and I are trying to do right now. And I hate the word try, so I'm going to rephrase this. What we're doing right now is we're bringing clarity to a different way um, to see and understand that you can become much more predictable in an industry that's used to um, not being predictable. And currently the process of being really capital efficient and highly structured, creating a manufacturing process actually has billions of dollars flying by it because there's not a focus on doing one right. It's doing a bunch in a standardized manner. And the geology tells us you can't do that unless you put in a process that evaluates all those uniquely and then gives you the best homogenized solution for a multi-well pad.
Yeah, I mean, you think of all the variables in play. I don't know how many variables, but let's say there's over 100 variables on what could go right or wrong in that well. How much more should you be leaning on a more defined, comprehensive process rather than a commodity mindset or a jug mindset?
Yeah. In that, maybe next week, I don't know, but we go into the how do you go in and test this?
Mm-hmm.
Because one thing that um, we've seen is companies make multiple changes at one time,
Mm-hmm.
and how do you measure which one really gave you the impact?
Yeah.
And so that's one of the things in the scientific process to really drill things down and or to target something, to really put, a laser on it and know you're going to hit the target. You can only really have one variable at a time. And that's another thing that in our coaching, we help companies look at making that one significant change so you can measure that impact versus we see all the time multiple chemistries changed, different designs in the completion process, and then you're measuring two against each other, and you're going,
Which one?
which one worked and why?
Yeah. Yeah.
Ultimately, you may see one that got better, but why? And so I think, again, it goes to having a standardized process versus a single solution. And that's how we recommend that we work with our clients, is making that one change, and that's to follow that process.
Awesome, Lloyd. I always learn so much in these conversations. It's a fascinating world, this well fracking stuff, and more and more. And although I'm not in the industry, all these little things keep popping up. When you go, you're shopping for a car, and you finally, then all of a sudden you see it a bunch. You see that same car everywhere. These conversations do that to me. I see all these different topics that are kind of weren't related, but I see where they're connecting. And so this is fascinating. For our audience out there, if you've got questions, please submit them. If you want to connect with Lloyd, what's the best way for these folks to connect?
Lloyd.brown@refinedcompletions.com, or hit us up on our website. And depending on what platform you're watching us today on, you can reach out that way as well. But the fastest, most effective, and most efficient is Lloyd.brown@refinedcompletions.com.
Yeah, so figure it out, connect with Lloyd, see how the refined process works for you guys. Excellent episode, Lloyd. I learned so much. I appreciate you, and we'll see everyone on the next episode. Any last comment?
Pretty cool how Starlink and new technologies allowing you to sit in your truck in Abilene, Texas, and us continue the conversation.
Yeah,
I'm amazed.
yeah, it's so cool. Find a little shade, a little plug in, connect, and talk about a predictive process in the oil world. All on Why Wells Fail with Lloyd Brown. I'm Steve Brown, your host, and we'll see you next week. Otherwise, take care.
You, Steve.